Let's be honest, Delia can't even afford her half of the bill tonight. The table went quiet, not the polite kind of quiet. The kind where aunts suddenly find their water glasses very interesting. I felt every single pair of eyes either land on me or deliberately look away. And then my phone buzzed on the table. I looked at that screen and for the first time all night I smiled. My name is Delia Fontaine. I'm 31 years old. I grew up in a mid-sized Louisiana family. The kind where nobody talked about money except to say there wasn't enough of it. My dad drove a delivery truck 6 days a week. My mom cleaned houses on weekends, sometimes with me sitting in the back seat doing homework while she finished a job. We weren't poor in the way people dramatize. We just knew exactly how much everything cost. Always. I studied graphic design at a state school on a partial scholarship. I worked 2 jobs to finish my degree, one at a coffee shop, one waitressing Thursday through Sunday. I didn't have the luxury of unpaid internships or a semester abroad. I had deadlines and a bus pass. In my family, there was always a pecking order. My sister Renee was older, louder, and magnetic in the way that made every room feel like it had been waiting for her. She had the right clothes, the right stories, the right laugh. People leaned toward her at tables. I was the quiet one. The one who observed. The one nobody worried about because I never asked for anything and nobody thought to give me anything either. 3 years ago, I moved to Austin to freelance. My family's reaction was somewhere between confused and disappointed. My mom said, "But there's nothing holding you there." And Aunt asked if I was running from something. Nobody asked what I was running toward. I wasn't rich or glamorous. I drove a used car and wore the same boots for 2 winters. But I had been quietly building something they never bothered to ask about. Tonight was the night I stopped pretending I didn't notice the disrespect. If you've ever been the one at the table who got talked over, looked past, or quietly written off by the people who were supposed to know you best, I want you to stay with me right now, because this story is about what happens when the quiet one stops being quiet. If your family has ever made you feel small at the table, keep watching. This one's for you. And if it hits close to home, hit that subscribe button and click like. You're going to want to hear what comes next. It was our grandmother's birthday dinner. The whole family turned out: aunts, uncles, 2 cousins, Renee's boyfriend of 8 months who had the energy of someone auditioning to be liked. The restaurant was nicer than our usual spots, which I should have read as a warning. Renee had organized everything. That meant Renee had chosen everything. What none of us knew until the menus appeared was that she pre-selected a prix-fixe menu. $95 a person. No discussion, no heads up, just assumption that everyone could absorb it without flinching. When the bill arrived, Renee handled it the way she handled most things, loudly and with confidence. She announced the split, rattled off the numbers, and then paused. She looked at me with something that wasn't quite pity and wasn't quite cruelty, but landed somewhere between the two. "Actually," she said, "can you even cover yours? I know things have been tight for you lately." I hadn't told anyone about my finances. Not the hard months from 2 years ago, and certainly not the branding contract I'd signed 2 weeks prior. A contract larger than anything I'd landed before. I hadn't announced it yet. I was waiting for the right moment. I had no idea the wrong moment would come for me first. Aunt Carol's hand went up immediately. "I'll cover Delia's portion, it's fine." She said it the way people say things they want other people to hear. A cousin nodded, like it was the obvious solution. Expected, even. Renee leaned back. "It's okay, Dee. We all know freelancing is basically just hoping for the best." Her boyfriend smiled at that. Not a full laugh. Just enough. My grandmother, the woman whose birthday this was supposed to be, adjusted her napkin and said nothing. I reached into my bag. I put my card on the table. And then I told the server I'd be covering the full bill for the table. Silence. Real silence. I thought that would be the moment. I thought something would shift. But Renee looked at my card and then looked at me and said, "Oh, did Mom Venmo you or something?" She could not make room for the other explanation. She refused to. I walked to the parking lot alone after that. The night air smelled like warm asphalt and restaurant grease. I stood next to my used car and I felt something I didn't have a clean word for. It wasn't humiliation anymore. It was something quieter and more permanent. It wasn't the insult that broke something in me. It was realizing they couldn't even imagine a version of me that had made it. 2 weeks later, I found out the family had organized a long weekend trip to Nashville to celebrate Renee's promotion. A group trip, aunts, cousins, The whole rotation. I wasn't invited. I called my mom. I kept my voice steady. She said, "We just figured it wasn't really your kind of thing. You know how you are about money stress." She said it gently. That was almost worse. She had taken Renee's version of me and made it her own. In her mind, I was already defined. Financially fragile. Better left out, easier to protect by excluding. I hung up and sat with that for a long time. The second betrayal came at a cousin's baby shower, about a month after that, the kind of afternoon event where everyone stands in a circle and the conversation loops through jobs and relationships and what people are doing with their lives. Renee was in her element. She talked about her corporate marketing role with the fluency of someone who had practiced the story many times. She was good at it. I'll give her that. Then someone asked about me. A family friend, someone I barely knew, turned and asked what I was working on. Before I could open my mouth, Renee said, "She does little design projects, logos and stuff. It's cute." The family friend smiled politely and moved on. The conversation kept going. I stood there holding a small plate of food I no longer wanted. Later, the same friend asked me again, directly. Before I could answer, Renee cut back in. "She's still figuring it out." I smiled. I said nothing. The room had already moved on. I used to correct her. I stopped. You can't argue someone into respecting you. The third thing happened quietly, the way the worst things usually do. I found out through a cousin, mentioned casually, like I already knew, that Renee had been positioning herself as the primary contact for our grandmother's estate matters. She had told the family attorney that I was unreliable, not financially stable enough to be a co-trustee. She had done this without a single conversation with me, without a warning, without even the courtesy of a lie told to my face. The estate wasn't large, a house, some savings. The value wasn't the point. The point was that my sister had walked into a room I didn't know existed and signed her name where mine should have been. She had made herself official and made me a problem to be managed. I sat with that information for a full day before I let myself feel it. Then I felt it. Then I stopped crying. That was the moment I stopped being sad and started being strategic. For the past 18 months, I had been running a boutique branding studio under a business name, not my personal name. Clients knew me through the studio. They knew the work, the aesthetic, the results. They didn't know Delia Fontaine from Louisiana who drives a used car. My biggest client was a regional lifestyle brand. They'd come to me for a full rebrand 9 months ago. 6 weeks after launch, their content started circulating. The rebrand went semi-viral in their niche, the kind of traction that gets screenshotted and shared by people who appreciate clean design. Renee had shared their content. I saw it in my own feed. She captioned it, "Obsessed with this brand's new look." She had no idea. What they didn't know was that the logo on Renee's own Instagram story, the one she called so clean and professional, I made that. I made all of it. The phone that buzzed at the birthday dinner? That wasn't a coincidence. That was a contract notification I had been waiting weeks for, a deal I couldn't discuss yet. The timing was almost funny, in a way that only feels funny later. I had a plan they never saw coming. Not because I'm vindictive, because I'd been invisible so long. I learned how to build in the dark. I wasn't going to announce myself. I was going to let the truth do it. My grandmother had used the same attorney for 20 years, Mr. Tatum. He was the kind of man who spoke slowly and meant everything he said. He had handled every piece of legal paperwork our family had generated since before I was born. He was not flashy. He was thorough. And he was loyal to my grandmother specifically, not to whoever was loudest in the room. After I found out about the estate filing, I reached out to him. Not to make accusations. I just asked questions about the process, about the timeline, about what my grandmother had originally requested. Mr. Tatum was quiet for a moment. Then he told me the truth. My grandmother had specifically asked that both granddaughters be involved in estate decisions. That was her original language, her clear intention. The modification that had been filed recently, quietly, through a secondary channel, that was not her doing. Renee had pushed for it, and it had moved forward without anyone sitting my grandmother down and asking her directly if this was still what she wanted. He also mentioned something that caught me completely off guard. He said my grandmother had been asking about my design work. Someone had shown her the lifestyle brand rebrand. She had looked at it carefully. She had been proud. She just hadn't said it out loud to anyone who would pass it along to me. Mr. Tatum agreed to pause the modification. He said a decision like that required a proper family conversation, not just paperwork filed by one party. He gave me a window. A small one, but real. Renee found out I had spoken to him within 4 days. She called me. Her voice had that particular edge, controlled but pressurized, like steam looking for a way out. "Why are you inserting yourself?" she said. "This isn't about you. You've never been reliable enough to be part of this." I didn't raise my voice. I said, "Okay, Renee, let's talk about it at dinner." She told her mother I was being difficult and jealous. Mom sided with her. Aunt Carol sent me a text that read, "Maybe just let Renee handle things. It's easier." I read it twice, put my phone face down, and started planning. I reached out to the extended family and framed it as a catch-up dinner, same restaurant. I gave no further explanation. No one suspected anything. Why would they? I was still, in their minds, the quiet one. The dinner arrived on a Thursday. The restaurant was exactly the same. Same smell of warm bread and garlic. Same low lighting. Same arrangement of tables pushed together for a large group. My grandmother was there, small and deliberate in her movements, sitting at the head of the table. She caught my eye when I walked in and held it for just a moment longer than usual. Renee was in a good mood. She talked about Nashville, about her promotion, about a renovation she was planning for her apartment. The table listened. The conversation had that familiar shape, her at the center, everyone else arranged around her. I sat quietly. I waited. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out a stack of printed folders. One for each seat at the table. I placed them in the center without a word and let people reach for them. Inside was a formal studio portfolio. My name, my title, creative director, the full client list, project credits, and a clean revenue summary for the past fiscal year. Behind that, a screenshot of the lifestyle brand rebrand, including the original contract, my studio name, my signature. Behind that, a letter from my largest client, and on the first page at the bottom, printed simply and without comment, my annual income figure. Renee stared at the folder. "What is this?" "It's what I've been doing," I said, "while you were telling everyone I was broke." Aunt Carol picked hers up. She turned to the rebrand screenshot. "Wait, you did the rebrand?" "I follow them." She said it with genuine surprise, the kind that has no performance in it. Renee's voice shifted slightly. "Why didn't you just say something?" I looked at her. "I tried. You talked over me. At every table. Nobody spoke. The sound of the restaurant kept going around us. Plates, low conversation from other tables, someone laughing near the bar. But at our table, everything had stopped." My grandmother reached across the table. She put her hand on mine. Her grip was gentle but steady. She said quietly, "I knew. I saw your name in the credits months ago. I've been waiting for you to tell them yourself." Renee straightened. She wasn't done. "Okay, so you have some clients. That doesn't explain why you went to Mr. Tatum behind my back." I reached into the folder one more time. I placed a single document on the table, a copy of the original estate letter in our grandmother's handwriting, naming both sisters equally. "I didn't go behind your back, Renee," I said. "I went to the person who still had Grandma's actual wishes on file. You're the one who tried to change it." The table went silent. Not the uncomfortable, loaded silence from the birthday dinner. Something different, cleaner. My grandmother nodded once. Renee's boyfriend found something very interesting to look at on the ceiling. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I closed my folder and picked up the menu. "Now," I said, "are we eating or are we done pretending this dinner is about Grandma?" In the weeks after that dinner, the estate modification was formally reversed. Both sisters. Equal involvement. Per our grandmother's original wishes. Renee never apologized directly. She sent a text a few days later. "I didn't know things were going well for you." I read it. I put my phone down. I didn't respond for 3 days. When I finally did, I kept it short. My mother called. Not quite an apology, but she asked about the studio. She asked how it worked, what kind of clients I had, how I'd built it. It was the first real question she'd asked about my work in 3 years. It was a start. A small one, but I took it. I didn't rebuild a close relationship with Renee. I stopped performing a warmth I didn't feel anymore. Some distances, once they become honest, stop being painful. They just become accurate. I visited my grandmother on a Tuesday afternoon, just the two of us. She made coffee. We sat at her kitchen table and went through the portfolio page by page. She asked questions. She pointed at things. She said, "At one point, you always had a good eye, even when you were small." I thought about all the dinners I'd sat through, All the quiet I'd kept, all the times I'd made myself smaller, to fit into a story that was never really mine. I didn't need my sister to believe in me. I needed to stop shrinking myself so she'd be comfortable. The moment I stopped doing that, the room went silent. And for the first time, that silence felt like mine. Have you ever been written off by someone who had no idea what you were actually building? Maybe you've been the one labeled the struggling one, while you were quietly putting something real together piece by piece, without anyone noticing. Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story hit something real for you, click like. It helps this reach someone else who might need to hear it today. Thank you for staying through this one. It was a heavy one to tell. That phone buzzing at the dinner table? It was a contract confirmation, the biggest one I'd signed to that point. And nobody at that table even thought to ask what it was. Next time, I'll tell you about the day my name showed up somewhere my family least expected. And what happened after. If you want to be there for that one, subscribe and hit the bell. I'll see you in the next story.